Hello everyone, so this will be probably one of the most important videos that you will ever see. And I'm going to take my time, and if you are in a difficult situation or if you are in a spiritually seeking situation, or if you're just curious to go much deeper into what life really is, you're going to not only enjoy this, but it might profoundly change your life. And even the definition of words like your life and everything might completely change. So, we are going to talk about true spiritual awakening, not the kind of neo-spiritual awakening that people talk about, where they become aware of one thing, but then chase another thing, etc. It really changes completely your perspective of apparent reality. So we're going to start first intellectual, and then we start to move deeper into experiential. Intellectually, you have Maya. Maya is the 3D world, the world you interact, your body, your senses, and everything that's happening that is basically triggering those senses to experience the illusion of reality. When you completely let go, you realize there's a different plane to it, which has always been there, but you were never aware of it. So this is something that is continuous, but you might not have been aware of it. And the detachment from Maya, the apparent short-term experiences of life, even for just a moment, allows you to glimpse into or to become aware of this permanent self. Not the changing self. Not the thoughts, not the emotions, not the impulses. Nothing that has any beginning, continuation, and end. It's the realization of truth, spiritual truth, is almost the baseline for anything else that you experience, because if you don't see that baseline, you are in effect blind to at least the closest absolute reality that we have access to. You don't need to take drugs, you don't need to take ayahuasca, you don't need to meditate even in order for that realization to happen. What you need is someone, a teacher, that brings your soul, your consciousness into awakening by questioning your current framework, in which the mind, some call it the ego, but I purposefully don't call it the ego. The mind, the person, thinks what it knows that it is. And logically, I can explain everything why it's happening. So, like I said, first I do the logical, and then we go into the experiential. So you have 3 energies in life: the survival energy, the procreation energy, and the consciousness. Where consciousness is not really even an energy, but it's the 3 forces that you experience in life. All forces like procreation and survival are contained within consciousness, just like anything is contained within consciousness. Now, most people, because they're not aware that their consciousness are constantly operating only within the realm of survival and procreation. And everything that they do, literally everything, is only surrounded by those two energies. And interesting is, for example, the body that you occupy, or you could also can turn it around, the body that you experience, which would be more correct. The body that you experience is a product of sexual energy. So you could almost say that everything that is as an organism is sexual energy, because without that energy you wouldn't even exist. So you're in a sense a sexual being. And what I found out over time is that if you suppress this energy in the psychoenergetic field, the body, then you're actually pulling out the vitality of the life force itself. You're suppressing that life force. So that's like the superficial, logical part of the physical existence of the psychoenergetic field, the body. And when you see it like a pyramid, you understand the chakras, you understand the nadis, you understand these kind of forces. You understand libido suppression, how it leads to toxic metaframing, to narcissism, how you can create a whole unified theory on ideal living and on ideal life philosophy, for example, just such as lifestyle design, etc., in accordance to what socially in the epoch we're living in is possible. And this is what I did with my free book. I basically figured out how to live in a self-loving, harmonious way where you're almost always happy. Almost always happy. Now, I have to say something, and I'm still speaking logically and superficially. We'll then go more profound. Almost everyone is miserable, but they don't talk about it. And it's also statistically shown, because think about how many people are on pharmaca, how many take medicines. They're not even medicine. They're just pills. Okay, they're synthetic pills. If you think about how many are taking antidepressants, depending on the country, sometimes young women take from 10 to 25% of the young women are on antidepressants. Read the statistics. Don't take my word for it. Go into any AI and ask for different countries. For example, in your country, how many people are on antidepressants? How many? So, what I'm saying is, most people don't eat well. Most people are on antidepressants or some kind of drugs. Most people are not happy. Most people pretend to be happy to the outside. Many people are suicidal nowadays, especially young men. So you have massive problems in society, and I always say humanity is still in the cradle of conscious evolution, and technology does not solve that. So that was like the high level superficial talk. And unless you spiritually awaken, you don't even see that dynamic to its fullest extent. You could even say that when the personhood, when the ego is reduced or even almost eliminated, the whole of the Kabbalistic society collapses because consumption drastically falls. Look at fast fashion, for example. Who needs fast fashion? Only people who are very much in this personhood, where their whole self-worth is dependent on how they dress, etc. So, what I'm going to say, and I'm going to slowly move into the experiential, is going to trigger something in you in everyone, which is the personhood. It is the assumption of who you are, which is trying to protect itself. And before I go deep, I'm going to explain why it's protecting itself. It all comes down to, when I say procreation and survival, the survival part has tremendous amounts of fear of death. And we are constantly bombarded by observing our environment, either videos, understanding nature, that there's a constant undercurrent of biological survival. Your cells are constantly trying to survive, your DNA is trying to survive, you're trying to survive in this world whichever way you can. And just checking the microphone is working. And so you're trying to survive whichever way you can, and that creates kind of like a psychological framework of fear. So we're constantly living in a state of fear, whether we are aware or not. And as you awaken to your true self, you will realize that we're all navigating this fear constantly in the background. It's like the undercurrent of everything that we do, unless you completely awaken to yourself. So the personhood, the ego, I say the ego is nothing else than an overclocked personhood. I can explain that because I think I'm going to do this now, because a lot of people don't understand ego. So when see, oh, you have a strong ego. Ego is nothing else than an overclocked personhood. It's an overclocked fear of survival or procreation. Imagine someone drives an expensive car and someone else scratches the car. And the guy comes out and goes like, what did you do to my car? You're horrible and stuff like that. What they're actually trying to protect by protecting their car is their status for survival and procreation, because otherwise they wouldn't care. And so most people that have this overclocked survival procreation mechanism, learned or inherited, they are actually very fearful of not procreating, or fearful of death, very fearful of death. So when you move into awakening, all that stuff unravels. And one part is our existence uses a lot of words and uses a lot of thoughts. And we love those thoughts, especially pleasant thoughts or pleasant beliefs. And so we use words to form thoughts. And these thoughts also form words, and we use them and fixate on them. For example, I am this. My name is so-and-so. Okay, so you say, for example, I own a house, I have a family. And for some people, certain things become their identity. And the identity is nothing else than a fixed form somewhere there in the sky, in the active consciousness, that this is who you are. And the problem with this is it actually stems from a fear of death. Because every thought is a fixed form, you could say, in the sky or in the active consciousness, in the cloud, kind of like, analogically. And when you fixate on that thought, it becomes a form, because it's so fixed. It's almost like you have, let's say, a quadrant or a triangle. It has the same amount of forms. So, and when you have a geometric form like a triangle, a mathematical form, you believe it to be permanent. Okay, now we're going super deep logically, but bear with me. So you have this triangle, and it seems like infinite, right? So there is no flaw to it, like a circle, like a perfect circle. It has no flaw to it. And it seems permanent. It seems like this cannot go away. The form is always there. So as you fixate on the form, you have this illusion of infinity. So a circle gives you the illusion of infinity. That's why a circle is beautiful. And you focus on beauty, and you focus on the thought, because it gives you, the more you focus on it, the more it gives you the illusion of infinity. What's really behind it is the fear of the formlessness, the fear of death, because death is the formless. The death of personhood is the formless. So that's why the initial reaction, which also comes from the pain body, like Eckhart Tolle would say, is the intent to stick with the form, because it's the right now for you, it's the closest idea to deathlessness, to living forever. So the more you focus on form, the more you are perceived. That's why we love beautiful objects like a car. That's why we put on nice clothes also. That's one, because we're fixated on that infinite beauty which doesn't seem to vanish. And when it vanishes, we instantly need to replace it. And it's actually an illusion, because if we would all be running it around naked, we will very quickly realize that the psychoenergetic field is going down and it's going to die eventually. It's going to disintegrate. But with the illusion of modern life, the concrete, the cars, the fashion, the fixation on words, the fixation on thoughts, on forms, it gives us the illusion of infinite life. And thereby we don't have to worry about the unknown, the fear of death. So now we move deeper into the experiential. What happens if we realize that there is an underlying awareness current which is impermanent, but it cannot be touched by words? Where there is a moment of realization where you realize you don't need words. And when you don't have words and you don't need words, you don't even need thoughts. If you don't have words, you don't have thoughts. And now I'm going to explain something psychoenergetically. When energy rises from the bottom of your energy system, or from the top, but mostly it's from the bottom, it goes through the chakras. It goes through with you using the nadis, the energy channels. And that kind of energy ends up in the brain, in the act of consciousness. And it wants to express itself. And so we experience life through the chakras. Depending on how they're configured, that's how we experience life. Depending on the filters that we have, that's how we experience life. And with awakening, the filters are going away. And one of these ways, there's like different ways to get the psychoenergetic field to rest in order to slowly turn awareness onto itself. And that's why you will hear many non-duality Advaita Vedanta gurus who teach this, or who show this, to use certain words, and they're very similar, because it all points to the same thing. So, for example, if I were to tell you, relax right now, okay, just relax. And if anything comes up that seems to move, like thoughts, whatever, usually in the past, if you didn't have a spiritual awakening guru or a teacher, somebody would say, yeah, let the thoughts pass like clouds. That would be like the Buddhist kind of teaching. But we're not going to do this now. We're not going to let the clouds just pass. the thoughts. So a thought comes up, a thought goes away. You notice something in your periphery, you notice something that you're through the senses. But I want you to do the following. I call this the zero state, or the zero the zero effort state. Anytime something comes up, try to consciously go into a state of absolute zero effort. Because you will notice you have to go into the subtlety. Because, say, for example, a thought comes up or anything comes up. You notice how your attention goes to what's going on. And that attention is already an effort. So you can sense how that energy is going there, and that's an effort. And there's a tiny bit where you are holding on to that effort. What I want you to do is literally attempt a state of absolute zero effort, where you more and more, you can breathe out if you like, and just be in completely no effort. And when anything comes up, drop again into no effort. Absolutely zero effort. And when anything comes up, absolutely zero effort. When anything comes up, don't give it attention, absolutely zero effort. And when you did that a couple of times, you go even into the no effort for no effort. So you're not even trying anymore to get into a state of zero effort because you already arrived. You're basically in state of zero effort. And now comes the important part. I'm going to ask you a question in the state of zero effort. And that is to use your awareness, not words. The awareness that remains. Ask yourself, but not with words, what is it that remains? In the state of absolute zero effort, what is it that remains? And just observe with kind of like a natural soft curiosity, what is it that remains? Without trying to use your mind or any words to figure it out. Just look at like what remains. And you don't need the answer immediately. Just rest with it. Like in the state of zero effort, just rest with what remains. And as you keep on doing that, you will recognize one thing. That there is an undercurrent of awareness which you are. It's not something that you observe, but that's which you are. And you recognize that everything else is that you observe that comes and goes is a layer on top. It's kind of like you're the infinite that cannot be named, that is here as awareness. And everything else, even that which you think you are, the body, the personhood, is just something observed. It's not even your true identity. That doesn't mean that things go away, that they suddenly change, that the field of projection completely changes. What it means is that you can suddenly relax into your true beingness without getting pulled unnecessarily into a seeming reality which is not even as real as you thought that it is. And as you relax into this no effort aware of awareness, your energy system, it's not even your energy system anymore, it's just the observed energy system of this psychoenergetic field that you apparently seem to experience, starts to open up. And then a lot of things around you start to change. You start to receive these downloads. There comes it's like you're connecting to frequencies that before were closed for you. At least for that psychoenergetic field, because the you even vanishes. There isn't even any you anymore. So there isn't like, this is you, this is me, I am doing this, I experienced this. That vanishes. Because there's just the awareness of awareness itself. And you realize that everything else was just a construct, an identity, in order to not feel the fear of death. And the highest form of spirituality that we have access to is the realization you don't need thoughts and you don't even need words. You can just perfectly be, 100% be as a beingness without you or me or any other word or belief, just resting in that awareness. And this is what Ramana Maharshi, Eckhart Tolle, Mooji, Papaji, Sri Nisargadatta, all of these non-duality teachers basically are trying to show you. That everything is fine without using identity and words. Plus also, if you don't use words and thoughts, there is no identity. Once you realize you can live perfectly well without using words or thoughts, or they're just little tools on the surface of existence that you can sometimes use, but your foundation is the awareness itself. That's who you are. That's what you are. Now, a lot of people say, oh, sometimes I was in that state, sometimes I was not in that state, and I wish I could go back to the state. The thing is, you're always that consciousness. You cannot not be that consciousness, because you are the consciousness. It's like water. You're like the ocean trying to say, oh, because there's a storm on the surface, I'm not the water anymore. You're always the water. So there's no going back to, oh, but before it was, so silent, and now it's not so silent. That's only what you're observing. So that's why the question with Who Am I by Ramana Maharshi or Mooji, or the self-inquiry, am I that which I'm observing, allows you to go realizing that by questioning whatever you're observing, whatever it is. So, for example, oh, now I'm not so relaxed as when I was in that state. You have to ask yourself, am I the one who's not so relaxed, or am I actually the underlying awareness which is observing the not so relaxed state of the psychoenergetic field? And now I'm gonna go very deep. The energy fields, especially the three main nadis, Ida, Pingala, Sushumna, the energy channels that rise up your spine, they make up what you experience as this incarnation, this life. It's like literally that's the life force, that's the fire, that's the energy that pushes through the body, and it determines like the vitality and the experience of what you're just now experiencing. And the energy, we are so identified even with that energy. It's very subtle. It's like, it's hard to say, it's hard to put into words, but it's like, imagine you're watching the glow of the fire and you see the movement of the flames, but you're kind of on top of the fire. Okay, then you imagine you would be like an invisible being on top of the fire. Then you're kind of like, you think you're like a fire being, you know? And you move very subtly with these flames. Let's say there's like slow moving, and you move very subtly with these flames, with this fire. But even that is not you. You are basically the awareness that is even observing that movement. I'm saying this because don't never get into the illusion that something that comes and goes is still you. So even if it's very subtle, so you're not the body, you're not the emotions, you're not the impulses, you're not your thoughts, you're not even the existence of this body itself. You are beyond that. And in the resting in zero effort and becoming aware of that permanent awareness, you get more and more into these subtler realizations. Now, the ego, the person, of course, says, what is it good for? And how do I pay my bills? That's, again, your survival procreation fear active. So there's still the personhood so fearful of death that it fixates on these forms. And like there's an Austrian teacher, Ansi, and it's a little bit like Rupert Spira from the UK. They're both non-duality teachers. And he said something very interesting. He said, the amount of ego or personhood or belief excuses that the personhood or mind or fear of death construct makes in order to not realize itself, to awaken to its true self, is literally infinite. So instead of doing this exercise, it will create millions and millions, an infinite amount of excuses to not realize this true self. And there is no workaround. You cannot find this answer of realizing the true self in anything else in life. You can read millions of scriptures, you can do millions of meditations, you can do 100,000 hours of yoga. There is no more direct path to self-realization in terms of recognizing the true self. There's nothing better than to just rest in pure awareness and in no effort, and observing from a kind of like passive point what remains. And then when there is maybe a little bit of that realization, the personhood again kicks in and is like, oh, I realized this. Okay, now I can go about my business again. That's the interesting thing, is that the thoughts creep up again, and the thoughts kind of create a new form out of it. So it created a new form. It's like, oh, I realized it now, a new form, and again, identify with the new form. And then that's why the self-inquiry, like Ramana Maharshi would say, is, well, this new form, am I that? Or is there an underlying beingness, awareness that is in which container, in which observation it arises. And one of the amazing things about resting, abiding in the self, or like Mooji would say, marinating in the self, is that many realizations, many talents, hidden talents of the psychoenergetic field, of your astrology, of your cosmological kind of parameters you were born in, start to reveal themselves, kind of like a purifying of talents, you could almost say, in the sense like doors start to open that before were closed. Other doors start to close, especially of of things in the past that you feel you can't do, won't do anymore. Sometimes it's very shocking. Like you go, for example, you have a certain job and you recognize the self, and suddenly you feel you cannot do the job anymore. Even if it was high paying, it was, so to speak, from society, it was just exactly the thing you should be doing and so forth. There might be a tremendous shift in what you suddenly start doing, but it's very automatic because you're unlocking all those doors with new keys just naturally by just being aware of the self and abiding and marinating in the self. And all the other changes happen automatically. You don't even need to think about it. And that shift can also create new existential fear, but you again go into, is that fear observed? Am I that fear, or is that fear observed? So the idea behind the question, who am I, by Ramana Maharshi, or the idea of self-inquiry, is literally to not get sucked or pulled again into the fake personhood, which is literally not you. You don't have a name, you don't have a body, you don't even have thoughts. It's just all observed. It doesn't mean that these things vanish necessarily, but it means that you are freed from the shackles of the identity with those forms. And that's the major difference. Now, we are humans in the sense like that's how we are humans in the sense how that's how we filter or experience this reality. So even if you have a full realization of awareness, you still filter everything through the idea of this psychoenergetic filter. And so you cannot use the mind in order to know truth because it just has this filter. And there is it cannot see this filter cannot see beyond. The only thing that can understand on an experiential level, not on a thought level, is abiding in awareness. And the good thing is that the questioner, the one who's curious, with that realization also vanishes. So you're not questioning, you completely stop questioning. You just realize that this questioner, the one who seeks, the one who is curious, the one who is the scientist, they all vanish. And there are some things which start to be kind of funny. It's kind of like a cosmic joke. For example, the scientist who's trying to understand consciousness while not realizing that he's consciousness acting through as a scientist. And the scientist cannot actually, the personhood of the scientist cannot look into consciousness because he already is consciousness that is kind of falsely, it's trying to study itself in completely the wrong direction where it's even not possible. So it's kind of funny. And also another thing is that whoever is listening to this right now, Eckhart, there was once a a seeker in Eckhart Tolle's audience, and he asked, well, I'm not awakened yet, when do I awaken? And Eckhart Tolle said, the fact that you're already here listening to this satsang is an indicator that you're on the process of awakening if you haven't awakened already. Because the seed is set. It may be a little bit later, maybe through someone else, the awakening truly happens. And then everything changes. And the more your soul craves this awakening and dropping into the awakening, the more things will change. And the more you start to see everything differently. And when, Gandhi or someone else says, be the change that you seek, it literally means the more you are on a higher frequency, but just awakening to yourself, the more you profoundly, sometimes metaphysically, you don't even have to say anything, affect the surrounding. And even that psychoenergetic field, because that's also your surrounding. So as you awaken, this also changes. So subtly that you might not even realize. And you don't need to push anything. That's a great thing. And you recognize that abiding in the self, not giving any attention to anything, just awareness itself, in zero effort, you realize that existence is just as there as it was there before, and you recognize you don't need thoughts to exist. I think this is one of the most profound changes that happens, is you realize you don't need thoughts to exist. Basically, the script has flipped a little bit from the fear of death to attaching to thoughts to just being okay with constantly being in no thought. It's the most natural state of beingness itself. Everything else is more like the horses that have these things, so they only watch straight, they don't look to the side, the kind of like things that they have here. Before it was like this, and then it opens. So the teachers that literally teach this are Eckhart Tolle, Mooji, Rupert Spira, Papaji, Ramana Maharshi, Sri Nisargadatta. Those are the teachers for Advaita Vedanta, for non-duality, the realization you are not your thoughts, not the body, you are awareness itself. The thing is, everybody has a little bit of a different way on going about it, and some commercialize it, some use it for personal gain also, but the awakening itself is real. The awakening itself is real, no matter what you think personally about these people, whether you feel that they do something authentic, inauthentic. The actual message is real. And one of the ways you will recognize why it's real, because if you take, for example, a look at Mooji, he literally doesn't talk about anything else. If he were so much in personhood, he wouldn't be able to do this consistently over many, many, many years, 15, 20 years, just constantly talking about recognizing the true self, because it's a real thing to recognize that you don't need thoughts, that you're not the thoughts, that you're just pure beingness, kind of like continuously, without beginning or end, just aware as awareness. And there's so many funny moments along the way of awakening. For example, when you speak and you recognize that you're not even the one who speaks, you're you're the awareness that observes that you're speaking. So there is something that is speaking right now, but I'm just the awareness that is observing the speaking that is happening. And when you look at someone else and you're deeply in this recognition, you recognize they're the same. There is no difference. It's all one. There is no like you and me. It's just you recognize you're talking to yourself. Actually, when you're talking, and then it gets really, for the person, it gets really weird. When I'm talking right now, I'm actually talking to myself because there is no other. And these things completely change the underlying current and of experience, of existential experience. And you will notice then also that many people who are just in the survival and procreation, the kind of epitome or the highest kind of like example of that are then, you know, the billionaires, the kind of Elon Musks, which they're so focused on the form. They're so identified with the form that it seems almost it would be a real miracle if they awaken to themselves and realize that it's all an illusion. And sometimes psychedelics or hallucinogens or ayahuasca or psilocybin, these kind of like, they might give you tiny glimpse, but people identify again with the experience. They again with the thoughts, with the identity of the experience. So they never truly awaken to the self. That's why I say you don't need drugs, you don't need all of these things. It's not an experience. It's a permanent awakening to the true self. It's not an experience. So when you say, oh, I experienced this once, no, you are that all the time. You're just not aware of it right now as awareness. And just by dropping again into nothingness, into the zero state, the zero effort state, and watching what remains, you become aware of it again. So it's always there, you're just not aware of it. And you can be aware of it all the time because it's your natural state. That's who you truly are. So be careful when the mind comes back, when the personhood comes back and says, oh, I know this experience. I've experienced it. Oh, there was a state of where I was feeling better and then I feel worse again. No, you're always awareness. It's just the psychoenergy, the experience of the sensory organs and the psychoenergetic field that we have the idea of some kind of change. But it's all being observed of what you by what you truly are, the awareness. So realize that every form, every thought, and now comes something super interesting. Every thought and every form is actually an energetic blockage. Because as these energy rise in the psychoenergetic field and they form in the active consciousness, and we focus on that energy, we are actually, by focusing on that energy, we are kind of holding that energy there, kind of in the mid-air. And instead of letting it flow further up, by focusing on it, we're actually creating a blockage. And that's why flow states, where you're flowing through your work or whatever you're doing or through life, is when you're not thinking. Every thought is a blockage. And I'm actually, in the whole world, I'm the first one. I am the I that doesn't exist. This psychoenergy field, now it becomes funny. I'm recognizing the stupidity of the I. I was the first one to kind of name that. And I recognize now the stupidity of the I that wants to feel special about it. And that's another thing about awakening, that there will be many moments where where you will suddenly start to laugh because you recognize the stupidity of it all. It's and when you watch some of these satsangs, especially the super powerful satsangs, you will see some intense releases by people that where the personhood was so dense and then suddenly lightened up by just resting in awareness and becomes super clear. So now you experience the life example of how the personhood kicks in again and wants to claim something. Yeah. So one last thing, because this is also super important. All these neo-spiritual people, the spiritual people that are running around there with their, I don't know, nose rings and I don't know, man buns and all of this stuff. Everything is spiritual, but there is no nothing. Everything is the same experiential level, but these people are not more spiritual than someone who's working in a job in the city, let's say. The difference is that the people who are kind of like the Bali, kind of like escapists, or the van livers, escapists, what they are is they learn to be more authentic to their psychoenergetic field. There's a little bit more self-love. But mostly it stems from because there was very little self-love in the beginning and they had to learn the harsh way, and they're a little bit HSP, they're a little bit crazy. So they had some kind of disease or something, so they have to be more authentic in order to not die. It's basically their only solution for psychological, mental, and physical survival. They're kind of like, they were almost like their soul forced them to take up a different lifestyle in order to have a little bit more self-love. But 99.99999% are not awakened to the true self. It doesn't mean that they are less or more. It means they're just not awakened to the true self. So they can't really call themselves more spiritual because they haven't had the true spiritual awakening yet. Now, all in all, cosmologically speaking and everything, awakening is a big deal, but it's not a big deal. Cosmologically, it's not a big deal. On the level of the personhood, it's a big deal. Because literally, a lot of stuff seemingly changes in your experience of Maya. But in reality, it doesn't make a difference because you were the beingness just as much before as you were after. So even if you're totally blind to everything, you're still the beingness, the pure beingness, the pure consciousness. You're just not aware of it. And so the whole thing becomes a little bit of a joke in the sense like there is no higher or less spirituality. It's like if you were going, if there was something going through the water, like a fish that is 99% water and goes through the water, some other fish in 98% of the water, and be like, you're not flowing in the right water. So it doesn't make much sense. But but on a personal level, you will feel a different sense of experience. The superficial experience changes by itself because you recognize what you're not. And you recognize that you're this pure beingness that doesn't need thought. So there seems to be a shift of perception. I would just call it a shift or perception. And but it's not something to judge by, and you weren't before better or less than after awakening. It's just something that for some reason, we don't know why, needed to happen or not to happen, this awakening. And for many, where it does happen, they become more of a vessel for higher frequency. So definitely after awakening, everything that I was doing was definitely much higher frequency in that sense. For what it's good, for what it's there, for what it's good for, who knows? Maybe for higher harmony, for higher self-love. We don't really know. But the good thing is, after awakening, you don't even need to know. And I have a huge Pandora's box of philosophical discussion, which I'm not going to go into today, on what life really means. What are we truly experiencing? Some of it kind of dystopian, kind of some other things very utopian. Just as an entertaining kind of thing, we could talk about it sometime. But the best way to get closer to maybe an idea of what all this is by awakening first and being very naturally without thought. And even if thoughts come, you don't care about them. And it unlocks other frequencies, like the heart intuition, the talents. A lot of stuff can happen. Yeah, but don't look for it. It just happens by itself the more you rest and abide as the self, or marinate as the self. And for everyone who's more interested, of course, you can watch all of these teachers that I mentioned. I put them in the description. I could even put all their YouTubes in the description. That's a good idea. Or you can also do a Vipassana course. The problem with the Vipassana, it's not always in congruence to what these non-duality Advaita teachers teach, but it's a very good stepping stone. For some, Vipassana already does profound changes. It's basically 10 days silent retreat, very simply said. Okay, so one of my most favorite things is to talk from beingness, where I go into silence, just aware of beingness, and see what wants to come up by itself. Happy New Year. Is that which comes up? Okay, bye-bye.